Mercy Watson, Princess in Disguise by Kate DiCamillo. Chapter 1. Mr. Watson and Mrs. Watson have a pig named Mercy. Mr. Watson, Mrs. Watson, and Mercy live together in a house at 54 Deckawoo Drive. One October afternoon, in the living room of the house on Deckawoo Drive, Mrs. Watson had an idea. "Darling," said Mrs. Watson. "Yes," said Mr. Watson. "Halloween is coming." "It most certainly is," said Mr. Watson. "I believe that Mercy should dress up," said Mrs. Watson. Mercy opened one eye. "I believe that Mercy should dress up and go trick-or-treating," said Mrs. Watson. Mercy opened both eyes. She liked very much the sound of the word treating. "What a splendid idea," said Mr. Watson. "But what should Mercy be?" Chapter 2. "Should Mercy be a ghost?" asked Mr. Watson. "I don't think so," said Mrs. Watson. "A pumpkin?" "Not quite right," said Mrs. Watson. "A pirate? A robot? A witch?" "No, no, no," said Mrs. Watson. Mercy sighed. She closed her eyes. She fell asleep. "What then?" asked Mr. Watson. "What should Mercy be?" "I am quite certain," said Mrs. Watson, "that Mercy should be a princess." "Of course," said Mr. Watson. "It's obvious. Why didn't I think of that?" "You must go find her a tiara," said Mrs. Watson, "and I will make her a princess dress." "I am on the case," said Mr. Watson. "Oh, Mercy," said Mrs. Watson, "you will be so lovely. You will be beautiful beyond compare." Chapter 3. Mrs. Watson measured Mercy from snout to tail. She measured her from side to side. She measured Mercy around and around and around. "Heavens," said Mrs. Watson, "I hope I have enough fabric." When Mercy woke up from her nap, Mrs. Watson was smiling at her. "Darling," said Mrs. Watson, "your dress is finished." "Oink," said Mercy. "I know," said Mrs. Watson. "It is stunning, isn't it? Let's try it on." Mrs. Watson put Mercy's right front leg into the dress. Mercy took her right front leg out. Mrs. Watson put Mercy's left front leg into the dress. Mercy took her left front leg out. "Goodness gracious," said Mrs. Watson. "Please hold still or we will never get this dress on." "My darlings, my dear," called Mr. Watson, "I am home, and I have located the tiara." "Oh, Mr. Watson," said Mrs. Watson, "I am having a difficult time here. Mercy does not want to have her princess dress." "Perhaps," said Mr. Watson, "you should tell her about the treats."